It was Gear Club's pleasure to have engineer and producer Joe Chiccarelli as one of our guests at AES in New York City. Joe's career spans almost 4 decades, and his discography is a literal who's who in music. Refusing to be tied down to any one genre, Joe's skill, versatility, and eclectic taste has put him in rooms with Frank Zappa, Tori Amos, Oingo Boingo, the Bangles, the Strokes, Morrissey, Dwight Yoakam, the Bee Gees, the White Stripes, and many, many others. Gear Club gives a warm welcome to Joe Chiccarelli.
Before you walked in, I was just asking him, so you're originally from New England?
Yeah, I grew up in Boston.
Oh, wow.
And then I lived in New York for a little bit. You know, I started playing in a bunch of bands in Boston. They just all went nowhere. Got the recording fix and was lucky. I was telling somebody just this morning upstairs that the guy who really, really helped me out was Shelly Yakus.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
You know, who you should have on the show.
Yeah, he's on the
You got to be on the top of the list because Shelly has helped so many people out. But I had a kind of second cousin that owned a studio outside of Boston. Mm-hmm. And the guy that worked there as the chief engineer, this guy, Bill Ferruzzi, trained Shelly and trained me a little bit. Yeah, trained Shelly.
Wow.
Yeah. So he worked at Shelly's dad's studio, Ace Recording in Boston. And so I got to talking with him, and he said, well, you want to record rock music, so you should meet Shelly. So he hooks me up with Shelly. Shelly's at the Plant, New York.
Yeah, the record plant.
Shelly says, hey, you know, if you're coming to the city, come on by the Plant. So I'm 18 years old. I go to the Plant, New York.
Wait, this is 18, so this is like 1977.
Something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you there?
No.
Well, yeah, I go to the Plant, and Shelly's there recording John Lennon.
Wow.
So I meet John Lennon, I meet Shelly. It's a good day.
Yeah, right. You win.
Exactly.
That's amazing. I only got the second assist for him, like on I think a Meatloaf record or something, like the Dead Ringer, whatever it was. But I remember I would lean over. They were mixing on the B console, and I would lean over and do the tom rides. Uh-huh. And then whenever I missed one, he would just give me the eye, and it was like that's all he needed.
I used to do that for Roy Thomas Baker, and Roy. If you ever met Roy, he speaks like this. Darling, what are you doing?
Darling, right?
So you engineered records for Roy?
I assisted for Roy on Journey, about 2 or 3 albums, and honestly, I mean, so to backtrack, Shelly was my introduction to a real engineer.
Right.
And Shelly was super kind in that when he moved to LA, he was at a time where he was separating from Iovine. They weren't doing that many records anymore. Right. So Jimmy said, why don't you call this Chiccarelli guy?
Right.
And instantly, I was working with Iovine doing
Iovine and Chiccarelli sounds perfect.
And exactly.
Sounds like a bakery.
Totally. Or an auto repair. I don't know, whatever it is. But Jimmy's a billionaire now.
Yeah.
You can't make those
jokes. It's a really good bakery.
Yeah. But Shelly really gave me a great break when I was first starting. Yeah. And I learned so much from that guy. And he's kind of an underappreciated guy in the business, considering, the classic stuff he's done, from Tom Petty to John Lennon to the Raspberries to I can't even go on the list. Didn't he? I think he did not Radar Love, but a lot of just classic stuff. Yeah.
Well, he goes very appreciated in our circle.
Yes.
I mean, I listen to Damn the Torpedoes like every 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's still one of the best sounding records I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. It's just crazy. That was 1978, right? 79?
Yep. Somewhere in there, yeah. I'm working actually right now on a project, this band called The Shelters. They're signed to Warner Brothers, and Tom Petty got them signed, produced their last album.
Whoa.
Wow.
And we're actually, since they're really close with Tom's family, they've kind of got the keys to the studio. So we've been doing all the overdubs at Tom Petty's home studio. And it's just fantastic to be, it's sad, but it's fantastic to be there with his guitar collection, his amp collection, and he's got an 8068 console. It's just great. But
really, too fucking
great
young.
artist.
But that's amazing that his family is like letting people touch it. And
no, you would think it would either be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or it would be on the auction block.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
But no, the family's keeping it together for a while at least, and his guitar collection. Because, boy, I mean, we're in the room with all the B collection, and of course it's the pristine Rickenbacker 12. There's a 365 there. There's Strats, Tellys, Les Pauls, everything.
Which one's the 365? Is that the single, the hollow body?
Two pickup with the rounded.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, that's got to be weird.
Being in LA for, you said, 20 some odd years, how do you pick your studios?
Well, the last 10 years I've been based out of Sunset Sound.
Okay.
That's kind of been my
So you
home
have a
base.
room kind of?
I have a room there, but I started there. I don't even, I mean, I'd worked there over the years, and maybe about 10 years ago went in to do a record from Mika. Do you know the artist Mika?
Sure.
And worked in Studio One, and I hadn't been in that room for 10 years prior, and it just clicked. It was just really good sessions, good sounds. I started going back there more and more often, and I just started kind of camping out there and making Studio One my home.
Wow.
And I was pretty much in there 6, 8, 10 months a year for the last 8 years or so.
That's
but
great.
about 2 years ago, budgets, of course, came down, and people can't spend that kind of money for a vocal overdub.
Right.
So they have a few producer rooms there. So I took over one of the rooms there, and I have a little setup to do vocals and guitar.
So you're tracking
So I track in Studio
and you mix
One.
there too?
And I know, well, if the budget can afford it, I will mix in one on the analog. It's an API DiMedio console, so it sounds beautiful.
Right.
You know, it sounds like an API. It's got the aggression of an API, but it's a lot warmer, a lot more open, a lot just bigger. It's aggressive, but it's just got size to it.
Are you ever forced to mix in the box?
All the time.
Right.
Yeah.
You say forced now, but last year you were making fun of me for mixing on a console.
Well,
all
I
the
said
time.
that. I said that to not offend
These
you.
guys, I got browbeat by Sheps and Lerman here for like an hour.
Yeah.
So I started
He's
mixing
late
in the
to the
box.
game.
I mean, that's kind of what I do in my room mixing. I have a Burl summing network and a bunch of analog gear, and I kind of do it that way. I still need some analog in the chain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I miss it. If it's
So you
not
go
there.
out and come back in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do it as hardware? So you must do it in real time, right? You don't print back in, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. What I do like is I've been printing my pedals for effects, guitar pedals, back in
all the time.
And this way the pedals give it some kind of gnarly.
I live by pedals. In fact, I got to go upstairs and see Paul Wolf's box. Apparently, he's building a specifically designed reamp type of box.
Okay, great.
That you can interface Pro Tools with your pedal board and back in.
Cool.
So like a reamp.
Oh, that
setup.
makes sense.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
which no, seriously, I mean, you know how it is. Nothing is Eventide, but usually the cheapest shit sounds the best.
Right.
It's got character, you know? Like, my favorite thing is finding these $29 Chinese pedals that sound horrific, but they have so much personality. You know, so using guitar pedals is like everyday occurrence.
Great.
You know, vocal sound.
Did you start as a guitar player?
I started bass player.
Bass player.
Yeah.
And would you play on records now?
It's been a while. It's been a
Right.
while. I just torture bass players.
As well you should.
They sometimes need to be tortured. Well, I'll tell you a really funny story happened to me recently. The bass player, we were in a room like this doing pre-production, working on song arrangements, working on grooves, working on bass parts, and I happened to be sort of situated in the room where my eye contact was with the bass player the whole time. And I was sort of like, this little turnaround, I don't know. The chord changes are the same. It's a little boring to me. Maybe there's got to be something we could do. Maybe change a chord. Maybe we can just make it a seventh. And the bass player looked at me and went, "Not my department." I was like, "Wow, that's great."
Oh my God. So good.
So you fired him.
So I fired him, exactly. No, but yeah, so I fired myself as a bass player. I realized when I was young that I wasn't that good of a bass player. I had terrible tone. I was too busy. I just was not good at it, and was not strict enough with myself, disciplined enough to practice all the time. And I got fascinated with the recording thing, bought the TAC 4-track, did the whole thing.
Oh, wow, cool.
And recorded our bands and just got hooked on it from there, and then just slowly moved away from it.
But no doubt the knowledge that you have from having played the bass comes in every day,
absolutely,
every session. And,
No, I'm always, I always think of records as, you're building a house from the ground up, and the bass and drums are the first floor, the foundation, and if that ain't happening, the record ain't happening. So I really do spend 2 weeks with a band in their rehearsal space and make sure the shit feels great before it leaves the room. Forget about the studio. I mean, I really feel like the best records I've ever made have been made in the rehearsal room and not the recording studio.
Right, because we were just talking to Tony Visconti, and he's, pre-production is being prepared.
Yeah.
And I think we all agree that.
Because also I feel like, and I agree with this 100%, but like when you also do the good pre-production and everybody's ready, then you can go in the studio and if you need to change something, you know what I mean? It's easier.
You're always going to change it. There's always going to be something you hear on the monitors that you didn't hear in a room that was 120 dB.
I agree with you though. I love the rehearsal thing is really good because that's also when you can have fun and be like, hey, be crazy.
And it's your get to know the artist time. And a lot of times I'll have to jump into a project and I don't have that introduction, and it gets a little weird in the studio, but having that week or two to get together and hang together, and then I think the band starts to understand where you're coming from, what you want from the record. They start to see where it can go, and a lot of times, artists get hooked on demos, or they get hooked on a way that they've played a song for 6 months, a year, whatever it is, and they can't instantly change. You might bring something to the arrangement that's genius, but it's new, so it's uncomfortable, and it takes a while for them to get accustomed to it.
Well, when I do work, I have a studio. When I do work at my place, one of the fun things I love to do is do pre-production in my studio. And I would say that the last 5 times I've done that, I call it a trick, only because you wind up with basic tracks. Every time I've done it with the band, they've walked out and went, fuck, that sounds great. This rehearsal sounds great. Why are we going back to track?
And then you start
it's like guide vocals, the same thing.
That's right.
We were talking about Morrissey a minute ago. He's amazing. This is a guy that grew up with punk rock, was raised at a time that punk rock was everything in England, but he revered crooners. You can talk all day long about Al Martino or Jack Jones or whomever it is, knows that stuff inside out. So when you think of his vocals, they have this kind of rough edge to them, but they always have these gorgeous, sweeping, old school kind of melodies. But with him, the way we go in and build the records is he'll come in the morning, perhaps with the keyboard player or the guitar player, depending on whose tune it was, and find the tempo, find the key, do a guide vocal to acoustic guitar or piano. He'll sing 2-3 takes, and they're killer. And they're so good that they inform you what the song should be. He knows when to dig in. He knows when to get soft, when to rush, when to lay back. So the song is all there in the vocal. So, and then we build the song around the vocal.
That's great. That way you don't have to put too much shit on it.
Exactly. It's all there. And then, sometimes he'll want to go back and try to beat the vocal, but inevitably we'll use a piece of it. And, I learned quickly with him that, man, I better get it sounded great on those guide vocals, have the chain together. It's like years ago I had the honor, the privilege of working with Etta James. I did like a handful of albums with her. Same thing. She'd get up to the microphone and one take, just like I'm almost crying thinking about those performances. I'd kill her. So I had to get, I had to know where the preamp was going to be, where I had to find a compressor that was working, did the job, but was invisible, and so you
don't
learn
want to be
like,
the guy who's responsible for I mean, there's one thing of trying to improve something. There's another thing of preserving the magic when it happens, and you got to be ready for that.
Totally, yeah. No, seriously, it's like some of the best stuff. It's sort of like, really, why are we redoing this?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But I got to ask you. I know we're going to jump all over the place. I'm a fan, so I got to ask you. I got to. Frank Zappa.
Okay. I knew it was coming.
Yeah,
I got it.
Well,
because Joe's Garage, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
You got to tell me.
I'll tell the story. I've told it a bunch of times, but I'll tell it. So I was a 20-year-old assistant working at Cherokee Studios in LA. Just moved from New York, and was there maybe only 6 months or so. And, I was the new guy at the studio. So, of course, you know how it goes. The new guy gets all the problem projects, the ones that work crazy hours, the ones that have drug projects, problems, the ones that are demanding. So I'm the guy. So they hear Frank Zappa's booking in. Every assistant is like, no, man, I heard he's crazy. He works long hours. No. So it's like, put Chiccarelli on the session.
Holy shit.
So I'm like, okay, fine. It's 7:00 at night, and Frank walks in the control room door, and just as he walks in, the phone rings. I pick it up, and I'm like, Frank, it's for you. It's his engineer. His engineer's stuck in England, has visa problems, can't make the session. So Frank says, okay, you're it. You're engineering for the next 3 nights. So I'm like, okay, fine. And luckily, I was not a fan. I knew his name. I didn't really know the music.
So it didn't throw you off your...
Right. I wasn't intimidated. I wasn't, if it had been somebody I was really crazy about at the time, if it had been Bowie, I would have been trembling,
for sure.
But so I just went, okay, great. And it was just he and I doing lead vocals and guitar solos.
God.
And he was so great with me in that he'd do these solos and he'd say, what'd you think? And I'd say, it's a little busy, Frank. But I didn't think about it, I just said what I felt. Yeah. And he'd go, okay, where? So at this spot here.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And he'd go and he'd try something else, and we'd do vocals, and he'd say, "What'd you think?" And I go, that spot where you go, "Broken hearts are for assholes." I think assholes is a little sharp, Frank.
Oh God!
And he was like, "I love it. It's great." He really appreciated my honesty. So after 3 nights of working together, he said, I got to go finish this album. They're all booked up here for the next 6 months. You want to finish the album? So it was great because here I am 6 months into being an assistant.
And you're out.
I'm like the low man at the studio, and I got to walk into the studio manager and go, look, I got to take a leave of absence for about 3 months because I got this gig engineering for Frank Zappa. So it was like great moment,
Did he have a house his own home studio?
No, this was before the studio. So we finished that album. Actually, we did some of it at Sunset Sound, the Record Plant, Cherokee, but we really camped out at the Village. We finished the album at the Village. He loved it. They had a Harrison console. For whatever reason, he loved that console. And then what I didn't know is Frank was a workaholic. He really, if he wasn't on the road, he wanted to be in the studio. So I instantly had a client. He went from one album to another. And after the Shake Your Booty album, which was the first album I did with him,
you did Joe's Garage.
I did Joe's Garage, and
that's a 3-album set.
Well,
right?
it didn't. This is funny. It didn't start out that. It actually started out. This is true. We went in the studio. The song from Shake Your Booty that was very successful was Jewish Princess.
Jewish Princess.
So he said, he called me up one day. He said, I'm going to do the follow-up to Jewish princess is called Catholic girls. So like, you know, I just go, yeah, Frank, okay, sure, whatever. You know, so we go to, you know, so we go to the Village and record that and another track. I can't remember what it was. And it went really, really well. Oh, and he had Vinnie Colaiuta for the first time. And he hadn't really been in the studio with his band in quite some time. You know, the Shake Your Booty album was basically live tracks that he stripped. He kept the bass and drums and redid everything else on top of it because he felt like live the band killed, but in the studio they were a little uptight. Right. So this was the first time in years he was in a tracking room with his band and loved it. So the next thing you know, 2 songs turned into about 24 songs. And I'll never forget, I said to him one day, I said, Frank, what are you going to do with all these songs, you know? He said, just wait. The next day, he comes in with this script. He's figured out how to tie it all together with the central scrutinizer and all that silly stuff. And he goes out to the microphone. There was a megaphone that was at the studio, and he picked it up and turned it into the voice of the scrutinizer. But he just glued this thing together into a little play, you know.
Don't make a fuss, just get on the
bus and be a cruise slut.
Well, I just remember Joe's Shake Your Booty being such a insane record to begin with. And then when Joe's Garage came out, I was like, wow.
But, you know, see, that was the thing of him. The guy was alternative. The guy was indie way before that ever happened. And for me personally, it was the greatest thing that happened to me because I was raised a pop kid, a rock kid. You know, I played in straight ahead rock bands. I played in R&B cover bands, but it was all pretty mainstream stuff. So to now work with a guy who basically was saying fuck you to the record industry at every moment he could, that it was great for me to have this sort of left school education, and it really pushed me. And you know, it was at a time, this was like early 80s, where everything wanted to be hi-fi. Everybody was trying to make the next Steely Dan record or whatever it was. So of course I had that mindset, and I was trying to make things perfect. And he just kind of look at me and go, "No, man, make it sound stupid. It's not stupid enough. You know, just fuck it up."
Turn it down.
Everything was just like had to be distorted. It had to be like, you know, the guitar amp in the toilet bowl. It had to be like just as weird as you could get. So it was really a great education. And of course, this is all pre DAW, so there's no plugins. There's no easy way to make any effect. I mean, the only effects that are out around then are an Eventide harmonizer, one of those ADA delays, an MXR flanger, and not much more. Cooper Time Cube, you know, not much stuff going on. Phaser and a flanger, but so it was a great time for me. He just gave me this freedom to do everything. Never really was over my shoulder.
And what a great group of musicians.
I mean, he had that ability to find guys who were just gifted and make them rise even higher. Obviously, Vinny, Patrick O'Hearn, Peter Wolf, Arthur Barrow, on and on. All those guys, George Duke before him.
It's
incredible.
Really is crazy.
Was there did he sing all the vocals on that? All the lead vocals on Joe's Garage? Yeah. Pretty amazing.
It was kind of it was M49 always, and Innovonics 201 compressor, sometimes an LA2A, but I don't know, at the time I was into those Innovonics. That was like bass and vocal.
What did he do? Was he picky about his vocals, or did he just
not too picky? You know, it was pretty quick with them. There'd be spots that he might have a difficult time with, but you know, but he knew how serious can you be when you're singing about a cruise slut? You know?
Catholic girls, or
But there was this. I don't know if you ever saw. There was his like maybe the first time he was ever on television was on the Steve Allen show.
Oh, wow.
You can see this
Oh,
online.
we've seen that.
It's
fantastic.
him playing a bicycle.
Yes, I have seen that. Yes, like a
And it's-
Rube Goldberg kind of
it's
invention.
sort of
Yes.
excruciating because he's not giving it up. He knows that he's like acting kind of wacky. Steve Allen's like playing into it, going, you know, and he's talking about the composition and the noise cycle, and it's.
But that was Frank. Like, you know, he was deep like that, and he liked to push people. I mean, I think it was always about what could he get past the average listener? How far could he push it? Which was honestly, like, I didn't know it at the time. I just thought it was this crazy guy that I got a freelance gig with. Right. But, you know, it was so great for me because all of a sudden I had to like look beyond, and I started to realize, wow, you know, if you really push, if you really try to challenge people, you can come up with something that's much more unique and much more timeless.
Yeah. Right.
So that was fantastic. You know?
Those records sound great, by the way.
They do sound great.
I remember
they sound great because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I swear to God, all I was doing was trying to copy Joe Robb, who was my teacher at the Cherokee Studios. Yeah. I was trying to copy him, and you know how it is when you try to copy somebody, you just do a terrible version of it.
Yeah, my Joe Robb is Bill Whitman. So you do a terrible version of Bill Whitman.
Yeah, I remember those records.
But I just to finish my thought, I remember Tony A. You grew up with him, huge Zappa fan. Mm-hmm. Listen to all the early records. And that's Weasel, Rip My Flesh, and all that stuff. And I was a little bit young, 10 years younger than him. So I was a little behind the Zappa curve, even though I heard this stuff in the house. But when Shake Your Booty and the Joe's Garage records came out, those were Zappa records that I actually bought as a kid. Wow. And I just remember thinking about how fantastic, and also the band, how great the band was. Yeah. Like, I never saw them live or anything like that, but I just remember Shake Your Booty blew my mind. And like you said, because they're so, like, the lyrical content is so, like, over the top, cutting edge, pushing boundaries for that time. It was insane.
Yeah.
So, but those records, they sound fantastic.
They do. They stand the test of time.
Yeah. Honestly, I really had no clue what I was doing. I swear to God.
Did you mix them?
Yeah, I mixed Shake Your Booty. Joe's Garage I didn't mix, but I mixed some of the other stuff, the Halloween stuff, and a bunch of it. Yeah.
Was he obviously would be present in the mixes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And was he hands-on or?
Well, at that time, the consoles had very little automation. It was a Harrison with some weird-ass automation system.
Everybody's hands-on.
So everybody was hands-on.
Oh, that's great.
And definitely pushed me with the mixes. And the thing with him was so many overdubs and so many little parts that just came in and out. So when you looked at the track sheet, you'd see snare drum. Then you'd see cowbell in bridge. Then you'd see tambourine in outro, all sharing a track. So every time when you're mixing, you know that channel 4 is now on 3 faders, and somebody's got to mute them and unmute them, and it was
How
nuts.
good is that?
Yeah.
Did you, when you did the mixes, did you just do sections? Because I know that was a thing, right?
We did that at times too.
You build the song.
We tried to get through it, but if it was like somebody made a mistake at the bridge, you'd stop there and.
I remember the Cyndi Lauper record was they did it with sections, and then they'd listen back, and Rick Chertoff, the producer, would be like, maybe the vocal's not loud enough, and then you go back and do the sections again. It was pretty intense.
Excruciating. Not fun. Because what would happen is, if you're going linearly, you know your dynamics, and you got a sense of how the song needs to build. But if you do the verse and just concentrate on the verse, which is what some people wanted to do. So, of course, you'd make the verse as big as you could. Then you get to the chorus, and how could you make it bigger? It would be small, so then you go splice it together, and it's like, we got to go back and do the verse again. Brutal. Yeah.
That's why records took like 4 or 5 months to make.
Yeah. But
Right.
they had $500,000 to make them.
That is so true.
Yeah.
That was that bump of
Now they take 4 years, and you got 50,000 to
Right.
make them. Yeah.
Well, when did you start to like get into producing?
Well, I was kind of. It's another lucky break. A friend of mine had moved out from Boston. He was a drummer, and called me one day and said, "Hey, do you think you could get me?" This is when I was assisting at Cherokee. You think you could get me into the studio? We could maybe like sneak in, do some demos. And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we did these demos together. He got all his friends in, including all the guys from Devo and a bunch of people. And we did these demos. 6 months later, he calls up and says, "You won't believe this. I got a record deal on A&M. I got signed." I was like, "Oh, congratulations." He said, "They love the demos so much, they want to put it out as an EP. In fact, they love it so much, they want you and I to go back in the studio and make an album. They want you to produce it." So I went and met with David Anderley, who was the head of A&R at A&M at the time, who was just so great to me, so great to me. And David's like, "Oh yeah, I'm blown away with this record, and I want you guys to go right back in the studio, do an album. In fact, I have another band called Oingo Boingo. I want you to go in and produce them." I'm like, "Okay, great." So all of a sudden, I'm 22, and I got a career as a producer. Yeah, I turned 21 when I was working with Frank Zappa. I didn't even tell Frank how young I was, you know. It was like my birthday in the studio. I didn't say a word to anybody.
And then Danny Elfman.
And Danny Elfman was another
Devo's
genius.
guys are all film guys. Very cinematic background.
Very much. That's true. Yeah. Mother's Bow. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of a sudden, you know, I went from having a career now as a freelance engineer to having a career as a producer. And I just lucked out.
Did you ever, as a producer, hire another engineer?
Many times.
And how was that experience for you?
Most of the time, great.
Yeah.
Everybody from my dear friend Chubba Petos, who passed away a couple of years ago, to Dave O'Donnell and Paul Lanny. Fantastic.
Right.
It's actually great. It's really, really freeing to be able to sit back.
Hang with the band a little more.
Yeah, and see the big picture, you know? I mean, sometimes you miss stuff. I mean, I can get so deep in a hi-hat sound that you know, meanwhile, the bridge has gone by and the guitar player is like, "Hey, what'd you think of my guitar part in the bridge?" And I'm like, the hi-hat sounds really good.
As the hi-hat.
You know? So there's
a lot to think about.
Great, and especially like I got a chance to work with Gladys Knight on something, and having somebody engineer that. And Dave O'Donnell did a great job on a Kurt Elling album I produced, and it was so great because Dave understands the jazz thing, but also I really wanted to push it and get a little bit more kind of R&B sensibility in the record, get the grooves a little tougher. So we did this Kurt Elling record together, and Dave was great. Like, he did his jazz thing, but at the same time, you know, Dave has got a rock background.
Yeah, right.
And he and I actually worked together on a Luba album, this Canadian artist, some years ago. And it was great because he kind of knew that he could be free to push it, and I could stand back and give some big picture direction and know when it's right. You know, sometimes when you're doing all possible jobs and dealing with the crazy bipolar guy and the other guy that's got drug problems, you forget the big picture. You're worried about all this little stuff. Right. And it's freeing. Right. It's great.
Do you tend to did you use Dave O'Donnell a bunch in a row, or do you switch it up for different projects? No, it was just like he seemed right for the projects. Right. And, you know, even now, a lot of times I won't mix my records because I don't feel maybe I'm the right mixer for it. Maybe there's somebody else that can bring something to it. And especially like when you're on a project for months and months and months, I find now more than before, but there's something about working digitally that you get your balances in the box, you put your plugins in, you're sort of working towards your mix, you're refining it all along.
And at some point you go, well, this is pretty good. Okay, I guess I'm done. Where obviously the analog days, you'd pull all your faders down, you'd start from scratch. Do you ever pull your faders down in your DAW? I don't think so. Yeah. So there's something that you discovered. You were, wow, the groove feels a little bit better in the bridge when I push the bass. Oh, interesting. You know, and you kind of remember that, you know, and then the next time you put the song up, you go, okay. That doesn't happen now. So sometimes it's great to have somebody else mix the record who can bring a fresh sensibility to it.
And you mix records that you don't engineer or produce as well.
Yeah.
And
that's the best, because you just like go in and you just fuck everything up. Right. You know, you just, you know, you listen to the rough mix once, get a sense of it and go, okay, how can I make this better? Right. You know, how can I kick butt on this? It's great. It's very, talk about freeing.
You like
really
doing that.
Good. Oh yeah. It's great. Yeah.
Do you ever get something and go, ooh, as a producer, go, I can mix this the way it is, but maybe they should have done. So you kind of communicate with them.
Many times. I actually had a project not too long ago where the artist came to me and said, we've worked on this record for like 6 months. We're kind of stumped. We like it, but we know that it's not done yet. What do you think? Could you mix this for us? Do you think you could straighten it out? And I went and listened to it. I thought, you know, the problems are more arrangemental or production-wise. So I sat there and made this list of, like, you know, change the drums here, get rid of the guitars here, sort of production decisions. And went back to him and I said, you know, I'm happy to mix it, but I really think you have some bigger picture issues here. And you know, maybe you guys should go back in and work on stuff. And they were like, wow, these ideas are amazing. How about if we do this? How about if we take a week or two, you come out, do these overdubs with us, produce the overdubs, finish the record with us, and then we mix it. And that's what we did.
Right. How often do you just go, this is great?
It happens, for sure. No, I mean, you know, that's the great thing that happened 20 years plus now with Pro Tools and digital, is the sort of democratization of things. You know, at one point you could talk technical with an artist and they would not, DDL, what are you talking about, you know? And now everybody knows the same plugins, the same microphones, everybody speaks the same language. It cuts through a lot of stuff, and it's so much faster in a lot of ways.
Well, earlier, before John walked in, you were talking about Broken Social Scene.
Did you do the new record?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kevin's
great. Kevin,
a wonderful guy.
Sweetheart of a guy.
Yeah.
The whole band.
Yeah.
It was an interesting thing. I had done an album for Arts and Crafts, their label, and was talking to the president of the label, and he said, you know, you should work with Broken Social Scene. And I was like, I love Broken Social Scene. He said, I don't know what they're going to do. They may not get together again. They may not ever do another record. This was about 3-4 years ago now. Right. And I said, no, come on. They got to do another record. Are you kidding? He said, you should talk to them. You know, and I went and sat down with them and said, come on, guys, this stuff is great. You got to do another record. And they're like, well, you know, I'm doing a little movie soundtrack and I got my other band and we don't know what we're doing.
But there's 15 other people in the band. So
exactly. It's kind
pretty
of a
much at least get 8 of them
5 different bands. Yes. Yeah. So the odds are you can maybe get a number of them to be excited and interesting about the record. The bad news is you got 50 people all with opinions. That's a problem.
But you were saying you were sending drives around.
So one thing we did, so I ended up, to go a couple of steps back, meeting with them about half a dozen times over the course of about 1.5 years, 2 years, and saying, come on, you got to do this, you got to write, you got to do this. And finally one day Kevin called and said, okay, we're going to get together and jam. They got together and jammed. He sent me 40 little snippets of jams, some 2 minutes, some 30 seconds, some 5 minutes. And I said, okay, keep this one, keep that one, throw that out, this one, use that as the chorus, build on that. And they did. And then 6 months later, we finally got in the studio, did something together. We spent, 3 weeks tracking. And because it's a collaborative, I'd work on it for 3 weeks with them. They'd go do overdubs for a couple of weeks. They'd send me the hard drive. I'd go and edit stuff or add things, send it back to them. Then they'd go overdub for 3 weeks and put a ton of weird shit on it. And then they go, help, I think we did too much. Can you? So I'd just clean it up, send it back to them. And, this kind of went on for a while. And we would get in the studio together at times and work on things together. But it was a very unconventional way of working. And the nice thing about it, the fun thing about it, is that they love to jam.
Yeah.
So late at night, they would always get together and do their spirit jam, as they call it. And many, many times, songs would come out of this. It might be a 20-minute jam, and then Niles and I, the engineer on the session, would sit there and edit stuff together and make a 4.5-minute song out of it. Right. And we'd come up with great stuff. So it was good for me in that it was freeing in a lot of ways, that I didn't have to, have the convention of, okay, now we're doing the pre-production, now we're doing the tracking.
And it probably was freeing for the band as well to know we could jam and throw it to someone who can make sense of it or help us.
I was working on a record with Sam Goldberg, who's in the band. I think while you guys were doing, did you go to Montreal for
We
them?
were in Montreal at Mix Arts for a while. We were at Union Sound in Toronto. We were at the Bathhouse. We were all over the place.
Because I was in Toronto at this place called Dream House working on a record with him for like 2 weeks in a break from... But I didn't realize you were doing the record. But we were on a break, and then he jumped into this project, and then he had said that the Social Scene's making a new record, and I was like, oh, that's fantastic. I met Kevin through Jay from Dinosaur Jr. because they're good buddies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's just super nice.
He's really Kevin's got a great heart. In fact, he's the thinking man, but at the same time, he's a super sensitive guy, and really, he's kind of the guy that walks in the room and understands everybody's mood and how to treat everybody. And
So, quick question, because I'm looking at some of these records. When you came to California, you got kind of ensconced in the California sound. Like there was a lot of people who lived in Southern California were making records there. Sort of folk rock records.
There was a lot of that going on. It's funny because I was talking to somebody about this the other day. When I did all the Frank Zappa stuff, I was in the Oingo Boingo and I did the Stranglers and stuff like that. I was always labeled,
the outside
he's
guy.
The weird guy.
Right.
He's the left guy. He's And then a few years ago, I did like Jason Mraz and Christina Perri, and it's like, oh no, he's not. He's a pop guy. Right. He's not cool. You can't. And then just working with I don't know the Wonder Years, who are this really heavy emo band from Philly. Oh, he's like an emo guy. Like you can't.
No,
win.
you can't win.
You have to be labeled.
Yeah.
It's not like he's a music producer. He produces music.
Right. But fortunately, you've been at it long enough to have proven that your scope is completely as wide as someone wants to bring it to you. I mean,
also those artists are significant, so at least you know what I mean. At least people are hearing the record, so that's great.
Outside record, right?
yeah, exactly. That's true. That's not good. Yeah. No, I had an interesting thing happen to me some years ago, and I really learned from it. There was a gig that I really wanted, this artist that he and I just like bonded. I really wanted to do the record. And I kept calling my manager, like, why isn't this happening? And he's like, I think you better get to New York and meet the record company president, because the record company president has another producer in mind. And I called the artist, and I was like, wow, man, I thought we really hit it off. And I really want you to do this record, but you got to convince the president of the label. And so I went to New York, sat with the president of the label, and the label president said to me, I listen to your records, I look at your discography, and I don't know your sound. He said, you're doing Oingo Boingo and you're doing this other thing. You're all over the map. I don't know how to take your sound and infuse it on the artist.
That's not his job.
But if I take
your job.
Exactly. So I said, I kind of think of it as I make the artist's record and the sound is the artist.
Yes, right. That's right.
I said, I hope I don't have a sound.
It's so great that you said that, because we just, with Tony Visconti, he said there is no Visconti sound. That's intentional.
Yeah. I try hard at when somebody says to me they listen to the record and they listen to another record that I did and like they're also great and they really have a sound. I'm like, oh no, really? I fucked up. You know, right. There's something that's a thread that's between there shouldn't be.
So you did or did not get that gig?
Didn't get the gig.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. But I learned. I mean, I went out of that office totally dejected and just really felt like, wow, I failed as a record maker. And then it took a few months to realize, oh, wait a minute, I really learned something here.
Yeah.
Maybe if I had a sound, maybe I would be the it guy for 6 months, 2 years, whatever it is, and then that's it.
By the way, there's only one Frank Zappa. So you don't go anywhere after that if that's your sound.
No, I'd be screwed.
But I was seeing Poco.
Sure,
wow.
Way back,
Amazing.
Yeah. That was just a great experience. They're great musicians. And I got the gig because the woman that was the assistant engineer on the Zappa album, her next project was a Poco album, and she loved the way the Zappa album turned out. The band was having a problem with their engineer. I don't know if they weren't happy with the record or he was busy, whatever it was, so they needed to find somebody else. So she was kind enough to say, hey, you should meet with Joe. I think he did a good job on this Zappa album. You should meet with him. And got along with the guys great, and I ended up making about 3 or 4 albums with him. It was wonderful.
Wow.
You know? So
your buddy's in the band, right?
No.
The Eagle guy isn't Tim Schmidt?
Timmy Schmidt.
Yeah,
he was in the band.
Yeah.
Oh, he's not with the Eagles now?
No, he's with the Eagles.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
yeah.
But and was it Rusty
Young, Paul
Unbelievable.
Cotton, and they're all great players,
Right. Beautiful
amazing
singers.
players, beautiful vocals. It was an interesting thing in that the song "Heart of the Night" was a huge hit off that album, and I'll never forget it. I had to go to the bank one day, and I got in the elevator and heard a Muzak version of the song, and I went, wow, I've made it. Something I've worked on is like, big enough.
At least you didn't go,
it's been,
boy, I mixed the shit out of this one.
Right. Killed it, squashed it to death. No life in it at all.
Fucking mastering engineers.
Yeah.
But so at this point, if someone is to call you and look at your discography,
they don't know what the hell I am. Yeah.
But it's everything. So
no, I mean it's just.
But that's
music. I mean, why an architect can go and build a house, they can go and build a bank, they can go and build a museum.
Right.
Why can't you do different types of music?
Right.
I mean, obviously, there's things that I don't think I understand that I resonate with the aesthetic of the music and wouldn't choose to take it on unless I felt like I had some connection to it.
No. Was there a style of music you grew up liking?
I mean, I guess I'm permanently damaged by Frank, so I do like things that are pretty quirky and left. I love jazz. I really don't get to do enough jazz, but I love jazz. It's a real stretch for me.
Do you like the live aspect of it, or just musically?
In general, the fact that it's players who are really at the peak of their craft, and that there's an interaction between the musicians. I mean, I think still to this day, my favorite part of the process is is tracking a band live and getting that chemical thing that happens between great musicians. I mean, it's just like, to be in a room and all of a sudden something that's good rises to something that's magical. That minute you're standing between the speakers and you're like, what just happened here? That's what you live for. It's amazing. I just gotten to work with so many great people. I remember I mixed some U2 stuff years ago, and they sent me these tracks, and you'd bring up the bass and you'd go, okay, start bass, bring up the drums and be, okay, bring up the guitar and you go, that's the edge, okay, the vocal, you go, that's great. You put this all together, it just elevates, it's just that thing of this chemical reaction. The Stones, any great band has that. All the pieces don't equal what they should. They equal 10 times that. It's just magical.
Fantastic. Yeah.
That's a great moment.
Which U2 record was that?
It was off the Pop album.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Did they come?
Yeah, they came and we did a lot of stuff remote. But they were really great. I mean, they were very, very open to letting me try stuff and pleasure.
Pretty great band.
And usually, I find the artists that are most secure with themselves are the easiest to work with, because they have confidence in themselves and they're confident in their choice of you as a collaborator.
Interesting.
They look at you as an equal, perhaps, and they instill extra confidence in you, and they trust you. And usually the process is very easy. It's an artist that's newer or perhaps more insecure that has a harder time.
Right. Do you turn records down? Yeah. And is it based on hearing demos or?
Based on, like I said earlier, perhaps I don't understand the music. I don't feel like I could be a part of this. I don't feel like there's something I could add to it. Sometimes it's I like to challenge myself, and if I feel like I've done 5 rock albums in a row and somebody calls me with something similar, I kind of feel like, if I get in the studio with these guys, I'm going to do the same thing that I did with these 5 albums, and that's not fair to anybody. I'll start dialing it in, so to speak, and that's bad. So I try to vary it up.
Do you still have... This is a leading question because I know my own answer is, do you still have the same passion from day one?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard not to, right? I mean, doing this.
I think now more than ever, I think there were times in my life where I felt like musically the climate was at an all-time low, or everybody was kind of copying everybody. But I feel like there's so much great stuff out there now. And usually at an independent level is the most creative stuff. But I think it's a great time. I think in a lot of ways, the last 3 to 5 years have been really, really healthy musically. I think, so there's a lot of stuff that I really get.
Can you work the same hours that you used to work?
A couple hours less.
So is that
helps?
Is that from 12 to 10 or 10 to 8?
That's from 11 to 9.
Okay, good.
I probably used to do 11 to 11.
Right.
And now I'm
you can get a dinner in
9 o'clock. I'm going to be sane. I'm going to get out of here. But there are times when I go to, it's such a magical place. Control room is so comfortable. You're in the missing. It's gorgeous. Band usually wanders off 9, 10 o'clock, and I'm in there editing till 1 a.m., 2 a.m., not even realizing it. Just because the whole vibe of the place is just magical. You just feel very creative there. The Mistral winds or whatever it is, putting all the positive ions in your brain.
That is true, though. When you're in a control room and it's comforting, it's really a beautiful cocoon to be in.
Yeah.
And even doing like drum edits or whatever, it's just so comfortable,
Yeah. I made sure in my little room to put a lot of windows so I have natural light. And that keeps you sane.
Yeah.
I can't work in these caverns anymore.
Yeah.
That was the way of the 80s, Can't do that.
Yeah.
So going back to the music thing, did you feel like the downtime was the zeros that decade was where the music was kind of copying stuff, or?
Yeah, I think there's always kind of peaks and valleys. The sort of mid to late 80s weren't so great, until perhaps the whole alternative grunge thing turned it around.
Right.
And it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day, that everybody hated on the early 80s for decades, and all the synth pop stuff that was novelty,
early MTV,
gimmicky stuff.
Right.
But now everybody reveres it.
Yeah, of course.
But no one ever talks about the mid 80s when the hair bands and the kind of corporate rock bands have come in. No one's tried to do covers of those songs. It was in some ways, it was probably the biggest grossing time of the record business, but that hasn't lasted at all.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the early 90s when the whole Seattle thing kind of turned it around. But there's definitely a 5 to 7 year period there where the unspeakable years.
But that's interesting that it was very financially successful, but historically will not be remembered as a lot of other eras.
Absolutely forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
No, I am with you. I just saw about
I can't see that
17.
hairdo coming back. I mean, at least for me, anyway.
No.
What are you trying to say?
Shut up.
You're awful.
Glenn Frey.
Oh, man. Wow, you're really digging way back.
He's got notes. He's the pro of the team.
But there's so much great stuff here.
You haven't hit the 2000s yet.
I know. Really, this is 80s and 90s. Let's go to the 2000s, John.
Yeah.
No, well, Glenn was great. I just mixed an album for him, and he was just wonderful. Just really, full of life. And the interesting thing is, you mentioned Timothy B. Schmidt and Joe Walsh. I think I worked with all the Eagles individually on different projects, but never ever worked with the Eagles.
Maybe that's
I'm
next.
lucky.
Well,
I don't know.
So was Glenn? Who produced that record?
No, Glenn had, I think, done it himself pretty much, and I just came in and mixed it. And he was great. He was really like a kind of cheerleader in the studio until it was at a point where there was something that he didn't like, and then he'd address it. And that's that same thing. Like he was really confident in what he was doing, and allows you, I just think that's part of it. When you really instill that trust in an artist you work with and they instill it in you, I just find, me personally, I think I do a better job.
Yeah.
Right.
But when somebody's doubting me all the time,
and it usually means they're probably doubting themselves.
Exactly,
as well.
exactly, yeah.
Right.
You hear something, you connect with it, part of your job is to pick out the strong points, hide the weak points. You go for it. In those first 15 minutes, you finalize it in the first 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Either it feels good or it doesn't.
Right.
Ultimately, that's the test.
Right.
And so to then go back and sort of fine-tune everything to the point where you diminish that initial spark and instinct that you had. What's the point?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Life out of it. Yeah. But so I got to throw one other thing at you.
Have you met my forensic buddy here?
Exactly.
My forensic
digging up
discography
dead bodies.
buddy.
There's a couple that I don't want to talk about.
We're gonna get to those next.
I figured you'd find them.
Just
dark
let
spots.
Pete know. Saturday Night Fever.
Well, I was only an assistant then. And
Still, I mean.
No, and got to work with the Bee Gees, which was really, really something. And
Was that in Criteria?
no, this was a Cherokee.
Oh.
And what was really great was that I watched them put together a track, and what they would do is record the drums on a 4-track analog tape machine. It was a kick, snare, hi-hat, overheads, whatever it was, and then make a loop.
Cut a loop, right.
Like get the 4 bars
Right.
or 8 bars, whatever it was,
Right.
that felt amazing. And then they take that loop, dub it over the 24 track, do the fills on top. So you now had this 5-minute groove that was
Monster groove,
unstoppable. It was brilliant, and that's how they did all those records. And to this day, Nigel Godrich does the Radiohead stuff
Right.
like that, builds loops, and then
Right.
everybody plays over it. So you get this feel that's just
Solid.
perfectly magical
And
for
danceable. And,
Yeah.
Right. And so, even so, like being an assistant, you were in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And did Barry produce those records? Or was that
Albie Galutin.
Albie
was
Galutin?
Albie Galutin.
Yeah. Who was a pretty funny story because growing up in Boston.
That's right. He's from up there.
Yeah. And Albie was in the James Montgomery Blues Band.
Wow.
And Albie walked in the first day of the session, and I was setting up mics for him or something or other. I was like, I know you, dude. I know you. It turned out he was the keyboard player in the band for a moment.
Didn't he end up doing like Jellyfish too? Like that band
He
Jellyfish?
did. Yes, he did.
'Cause that was a
With
fantastic
Jack,
record.
He and Jack Joseph Puig killed those records.
Those
and
records
Roger
sound
Manning, who's the
fantastic.
keyboard player I hire now for all my projects, was one of the
Jellyfish
principals
guys,
in the
yeah.
band.
Right.
Yeah, I remember those records coming out and me being like,
Yeah.
what? This sounds great.
Yeah.
And then looking, Albie Galutin, he's the Saturday Night Fever guy. Like, it was totally mind-blowing.
That's
for
right.
me.
But see, that's the thing again. Like, why can't a producer that
Yeah.
did Saturday Night Fever
Jellyfish.
do this XTC Beatles-esque
Right.
kind of record?
Right.
It's all music,
Yeah.
you know?
And
But
it's-
yeah, they were right. But see, that's a sad thing. Like, that's a band that should have happened, but they almost were released at the wrong time
Right.
because it was that late
Yeah.
80s,
Right.
early 90s thing
Right.
about to change. They were doing this produced Beatle thing
Yeah.
when everybody all of a sudden was making records in their garage that were supposed to sound crude. I remember I couldn't get hired for projects in the early 90s because people said to me, you know what, your stuff is too hi-fi. It's
Right.
too clean. So I was like, okay, fine. I went
Yeah.
and hired a young engineer to work with me
Right.
and just was hands
Right.
off and let him do his
Wow.
thing. And, you know,
Let this guy distort everything.
yeah, exactly. So it was great. I learned how to distort
Right.
stuff again.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
Yeah.
so it's kind of. I mean, it's great. Like I actually love working with other people just for those reasons.
Right.
And it's the same thing with we were talking about the sort of democratization of music, that everybody has a laptop and everybody has tools, and you see. Oh, wow, that's interesting what they did.
Right.
You know, I learn more. Like the Mix with the Masters seminars when I go over to France with 15 guys in a room,
Right.
I'm sucking their brains
Yeah.
dry. You know, I
really?
want to see what they're doing, you know?
Well, oftentimes, like working in bigger studios where, like, you know, in New York, for instance, where we are, Electric Lady or Power Station or studios like that, I learned so much from the kids who work there, because it's possible that the night before you were in the room, or it's possible the day before he was in the room. And I set up the piano and go, hey, who
What
was
did
here
they do?
yesterday? Can I see that, please? And most of the time, it's like, wow, a learning experience.
Absolutely. But you know, the weird thing is that I used to do that all the time when I first started. I'd go in and sneak in and see somebody's
Right.
setup, you know, and you'd try to copy it. But every time I copied it, it sounded awful.
Right.
Like,
Or completely different.
Wait, awful or different? 'Cause that's,
no, just awful. Terrible. But it's
That
not.
must have been me.
You were in a couple of times, weren't you? No, but you have to figure out that it's not what they did, it's why they
Yeah,
did it.
that's right.
And that takes being in the room
Right.
or at least having the conversation. And, you know, so ultimately, years down the line, you start to think of like, okay, I'm in this spot. I'm having a hard time getting this to sound right or feel right. Okay, what trick from the past can I rely on? And why did that guy in this situation do this particular setup
Yeah.
or approach
Right.
or whatever it was?
Right.
So it's definitely something to
It's
learn.
like, you know, the Glyn Johns 4 mic drum thing.
Right.
Is anyone giving John Bonham any credit for like playing the fucking drums under those mics?
Yeah.
But Glenn will be the first one to tell you, though. Glenn, I remember once said to me that it was the easiest thing in the world to record because he was so well balanced.
Yeah,
he knew to hit his kick drum hard, hit his toms hard, not wail into his cymbals or hi-hat. He said, it was simple. Right. It was simple. And ultimately, it's always the musician.
Absolutely.
I mean, the it's in the hands.
Absolutely.
I mean, really, like I was saying earlier, I learned that as a bass player. I had a 72 P bass, and I could never get a good sound out of it. It should be a great sounding bass. Right. And one day, my sort of local hero bass player picked up my bass and started playing.
It sounded great.
It sounded amazing. What?
No.
It's here. It's not anywhere else. I was ready to get rid of it. But seriously, you should get some, latter day stuff in.
Let's do it.
Get some anything. White Stripes.
Let's do some
Mraz, My Morning Jacket.
My Morning
Morrissey,
Jacket.
I don't know whatever.
Where did you work with My Morning Jacket? Was that
we
here?
actually did it here at Avatar.
Right.
Yeah, it was great. We had a blast. It was interesting
great kids.
because
Yeah, those are great guys.
Great guys,
Yeah.
sweetest guys in the world, most democratic band I've ever worked with. They just get along. They love Jim, his songwriting.
Yeah.
They're so respectful of it. And it was really a really great collaboration. We had a really, really good time. It was interesting. They didn't want to do any pre-production because they had spent 2 or 3 weeks together in a cabin writing, and they felt like, we've done that. We don't want to hole up in a rehearsal place. Right. So I had to go into the album without any pre-production time. Right. And I was sort of felt like, one hand tied behind my back.
Had they sent you stuff they were working on?
They did.
Right.
But it was funny because I really, I speak my mind. And I think at first they were a little put off by it, but all of a sudden they sort of realized that, he's on our team. He's he's trying to make the most. But that sort of uncomfortable period would normally come, in a pre-production room or over beers or out to sushi or whatever it is, and we just kind of jumped into it. But what was really good for them is that we all stayed here in the city. So, who went out for a drink at night or got together in the morning for breakfast or went out to see a band this city can be so invigorating and so inspiring for people. Yeah. That was great. And anytime I've ever made a record here, you feel charged by it. And I really think that records are definitely influenced by the environment. There's a stamp there. Bowie's Berlin period. This is perfect,
and Jim's quite a singer.
Yeah. Jim is great.
Right.
Carl's a hell of a guitar player.
Carl, I've hired Carl to play. I've actually hired pretty much all the band to play on other projects for me because they're all such great players. But what was great about Jim is his understanding of reverb and effects.
Right. He likes his reverb.
Yes. Obviously, he's weaned off it over the years. It's not such a thing. But at the time, it was really part of his sound. But he understood the difference between a plate and a spring and a chamber and how to sing into it. And it was really an instrument. It would be like why you'd pick up a Strat or a Les Paul. Yeah, it was just part of the thing to him. And the one thing, and I've told Ray and Tony this in the past, the one thing we did with the record is it was at the time when Eventide came out with all the delay factor, mod factor pedals, and Ray sent me a slew of them, and the delay, I think, was the first one out. And I was so infatuated with it, and the quality of the audio was so great that I would sit there after we would do like lead vocals or background vocals. I'd sit in the studio for about an hour or so, and I'd go and get delay settings that I liked, and I'd print this one, then print that one, print maybe 4 or 5 of them. Then I'd sit there and chop them up and go, okay, this one weird one sounds great on this word. Oh, this one sounds great in the bridge.
Oh, great, yes.
Oh, this one works for the choruses.
Nice.
And I had this super quality delay map of the tune all made from the boxes, you know?
Yeah, they sound
Fabulous.
great. And I love the tap time is really helpful because if you really, I don't always want the delay in time.
No.
You know what I mean?
We were talking about, somebody asked me this morning, do you put your delays in time? And I said, you know what? Almost never.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, maybe a guitar part or a synth part or maybe a snare drum that you want really locked. But it always sounds better if it's just a little
You hear it
off.
more, basically,
Well,
right? But I mean, but there are
Whitman-
times when I do want it to go bap, bap, bap. And
Whitman would say 252 milliseconds. I don't care what the tempo is. I don't care.
yeah, but he also says, if you ask him what time it is, he says 250.
That's right. AM or PM.
Oh, my God. But so tell us about Jack White, the White Stripes.
Yeah.
Jack was great. Jack was really great to me and a pleasure to work with. He, again, I got involved with him because I had done an album with the Shins, and he shares the same manager as the Shins. The manager was kind enough to say, hey, you know, Jack, you should meet this guy. I think he might be good for you to work with. And so Jack and I worked together on a couple little solo songs. And then one day he called me and said, hey, I'm going to do another White Stripes record. Would you be into doing the record? I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan. You were talking about the Glyn Johns thing.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing for me was, you know, I really thought about the record, and they had just done the album at Toe Rag Studios there, Elephant and Get Behind Me, Satan that he did. And I thought, oh, wow, this is kind of going to be cool. This will be my opportunity to do that classic rock record. I think I'll just mic the drums with 4 mics, and I'll do the Glyn Johns thing of the 67, a foot back or so from the amp, and that'll be it. This is going to be a kind of purist or classic kind of approach to making the record. And I was really dead set on this concept. I get high on my concepts, you know? And so I went in the first day, and we were at Blackbird, and I had worked at Blackbird before, and Studio D's, like a ridiculously great sounding room. Just so great sounding. And it's got every piece of gear in the world there. And so I had all these great mics, and Meg's out there getting a drum sound, and I was a half hour into it, and I heard it with this Glyn Johns approach. And I was like, hey, Jack, can you give me about half hour or so? I'm not crazy about the drum sound. And he was like, what do you mean? It sounds good. I said, no, I think I want to do something more than this. And it all of a sudden hit me there that this was 2008 or 7, whatever that was. And maybe it was at a time where hip-hop was coming on strong, perhaps, or people were just making bigger records and wanted more information out of 2 speakers, that I was doing this kind of classic thing that had no connection with the time that it was being made in. And not that a record should emulate anything that was done at a time, unless you're making those kind of records. But I just felt like it was wimpy. It was small. It wasn't powerful. So I just said to the assistant, you know, get 2 Fairchilds, get 2 more Blue Faces, get the DBX boombox, like get me 10 more microphones, find every like lo-fi microphone you can find in the house. And it went from 4 microphones to 14 microphones to no compression to 6 compressors. And I just beefed the whole thing up. And I just kind of realized that maybe people didn't want to hear the White Stripes in this purist black and white sort of performance captured way that he, you know, Jack, it was really funny. Jack said to me before we made the record, he said, you know, I really want to get out with this record. I really want to get experimental. I think I want to do this record on 16-track analog. And I kind of didn't say much. She said, yeah. He said, I've made all the albums before on 8-track analog. I think I want to go wild and go 16.
Party on.
Yeah, exactly. Like, wow. Bring out the tambourines or whatever, know. And
break out the tambourines.
Yeah, I hate
In case
tambourines.
of fire, break out the tambourines.
Yeah, no, burn them. I hate tambourines. I have this thing. This is kind of like, it sounds like your grandfather's music or something or other. I hate it. But anyways, so I kind of realized, no, I had to step it up, you know? And, so in another hour later, I had something that was much bigger and much more modern.
And did he like it?
But he loved it.
Great.
Loved it. And he was great. We did the raconteurs together. We did solo stuff together. And he was really great with me. He wasn't so technical at the time. So like Frank gave me a lot of space, he just like turn the solo up, like make it more this or more that. But he wasn't ever over my case about, you need more 3K or any of that silly shit. It was always about big picture. And that's what you always want. Yeah. My favorite sessions, like some of my favorite times, like I mixed an album for Ricky Lee Jones.
Oh, yeah.
And Ricky Lee is super intense, super musical. Ricky would tell stories about the songs. And she wouldn't say, this is what I want. She'd feed you this story. And sometimes without you even knowing it, she'd just be out of the blue, start to tell this story. And then you'd figure out that, oh, this is the emotion of the next song I have to mix this afternoon. Right. And
that's fantastic.
It's unbelievable because then you're given this freedom to do whatever you want, but capture that spirit, that feel, that emotion, that intention that she had for the song. And she's connected enough as an artist, as a writer, as an artist, that she knows when the emotion of the tune is right. And that's all she cares about. Not really important that the trumpet is up or down here. It's like you captured the right feel. Man, great. That's what it's all about.
Strokes.
Amazing players, really. It was a
Did you do it here?
Yeah, we did it here actually at Avatar again, and it was kind of tricky in that we tried a lot of things. It was a time of experimentation for them. In fact, I think we even set up 2 and 3 drum kits in the studio, and on every song we tried different things, and it was a very different process, very sort of build it as you go, one step at a time, sometimes even breaking the drum kit down to just kick drum, just hi-hat, and building it one piece at a time. But amazing players, all of them.
He's a great singer, too.
Julian's
He's kind of amazing.
One of a kind. He's pretty special and just has that thing with his voice that his voice... It doesn't need the distortion. It can cut through anything.
That's right.
You can keep lowering it in the track and lowering it, and it's still there loud. Through, it's pretty impressive. But Nick, amazing guitar player. Nikolai, like it's interesting sometimes. Like you don't realize how complex those albums are. You think it's straight ahead, kind of eighth notey punk rock. It's far from that. I
would imagine they were hands-on mixing.
I didn't mix the record.
Oh, you didn't?
But they were very, very involved in the studio. But all very experienced, really, really good ideas. Albert was always that guy. It was interesting. That point where you get to a song where you're like, this is happening. This is great. And everybody's sort of like, yeah, this is great. Albert was that one guy that would go, yeah, but, and you'd want to like throw your hands up. However, the but was always something so insightful, so astute of an observation that you were like, whoa, give me a minute.
Right.
Let me address this. And then the record gets 10% better.
Yeah.
And always that guy, like somehow he could see further. Really, really impressive. Really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, they are just, I just remember when I was mixing maybe Not a Surf, a couple of songs for them a long time ago, like the Zeros. The drummer came in and like, you guys got to hear this Stroke stuff. This is amazing. And we're like, what? And I was like, yeah, they're from New York, but they made it. They're huge in England, and you know what I mean. And I was like, holy shit, this stuff is cool.
Yeah, that's the one band, you know. Over the years, you always get hyped on bands, and I stay connected to the A&R community, and I'm always hearing, you know, the buzz about this artist, buzz about that artist, what major label is signing a band for $20 million, and, you know, you got to see this band, and blah, blah, blah. Almost always, it's really terrible. It's really like flavor of the month, perhaps. Right. And I got the buzz on the Strokes for months. Right. And I happened to see them at South by Southwest before they got signed. And I'll never forget, I remember walking in the room, hearing about 1.5 songs, and I went, yep, absolutely.
Right.
You know,
go ahead, sorry.
I wasn't at South by Southwest this year, but I got a hip to this band, The Idols.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently, I sent a bunch of friends to see them, just buddies I knew who were down there, and they have that thing where they're really energetic and really primal, and you know, it's really in your face. The songs are really cool. They all sound different. It's a cool thing when that happens.
And it's not often.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Do you have time to go out and see music?
Yeah,
you do.
Oh no,
you make a point of it.
I try all the time to go hear things that I get hyped on, or you know, see friends. You know, unfortunately, I don't have as much time as I used to. But no, I try to do it. It's something that I think is really kind of important to kind of keep it fresh.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And like I say, there's really great stuff out there. I mean, people are there. It's a time where I think there's a freedom to do whatever you want. Maybe it's because the record business is diminished so much for things other than country and hip hop. So you have the freedom now to be as groundbreaking or left of center as you want. So there's a lot of freedom in that, and a lot of freedom in poverty, I guess.
But no, pop music is one thing, you know, and that has its confines, probably more so today than ever.
Yes.
And then there's everything else.
Right.
There's also like a dearth of A&R people now in that kind of genre of music. You know what I mean? There aren't A&R guys anymore who help with direction. So it's you do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's sort of like you see something on YouTube. It sounds like something that was made 6 months ago and that sold a lot. So you go and sign that artist. And there's unfortunately a lot of that goes on. But there are guys out there. I will say there's definitely in every generation there are A&R guys that are savvy and connected and have that John Hammond gene, where they can see something in a very embryonic stage and recognize the talent and see down the line where it can go. I mean, obviously, decades ago, record companies had the money and the time and the commitment to see an artist through 4 albums before it happened. That doesn't happen anymore. You do it on your own. You know.
I think it was also back then it was great because, you know, the re-releasing your entire catalog on compact disc and just it was like printing money for them. Yeah. You know, because they didn't have any costs except for remastering, and then, you know, you sell 1 million Who records and it was...
But they still put breakable goods in the contract, and what's breakable about a file?
Oh, boy. What else you got there, Professor?
There's so much. But is there any band or topic or concept or belief or disbelief or...
No, I mean, I think I probably covered a bunch of stuff, and I do... I do feel positive about where music is at. You know, people can get pretty down these days on things, but I find stuff all the time. I just heard this band from England, Radiant Child, that I loved. And what else did I hear the other day that I was blown away with? Radiant Children, sorry. but I mean, I'm hearing stuff all the time that I think is really fresh sounding, and I think the fact that the process is so easy now is really helped that. I think that the years of the labels and the small group of producers having all the control, thank God that's gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I hit you with a couple of quickies?
Yeah.
And just give me your take, because bands I even know where I like.
Yeah.
Spoon.
Oh, great.
Jim Eno's pretty rad, right?
Jim's great drummer, great co-producer. Britt is a fantastic singer.
Right.
There's a band that has a sound, and they've developed it, changed it a little bit.
But every one of their records sounds different, right? It's really interesting how they
try things. The album before I did They Want My Soul, and the album before that, Transference, was very much about grooves and sort of danceability, if you will, very experimental in a lot of ways. Right. And then, luckily, the album I worked on, they were in a place where they wanted to do more pop songs, I guess, more accessible sort of things, and it wasn't really deliberate, but just happened to be that, and the album took shape in that manner. And there was some new people in the band, Alex Michelle, who's a great keyboard player. And,
cool.
It was a really, definitely, it was an interesting process. We did some of it at Sense of Sound. We did some of it at Jim's studio in Austin, which is a great studio, great old Neve console.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, really, really nice.
Yeah, he's got a good setup.
Yeah, no, he's a talent.
Yeah.
He's
a nice dude too.
Really nice guy, very mellow guy, kind of like the stable guy, keeps it all together.
Cafe Tacuba.
My favorite. Yeah. I just saw them the other night.
Oh, great.
They came by the studio. They were playing L.A. I talk about fearless in that Frank Zappa way. They're not afraid to try anything. They loved it when you push the boundaries, and they push it musically. Right. I mean, so once again, it inspires you to go further. But fearless is a word that I use often, and I think you have to be that in making music. And if you look at Zappa, who we initially talked about, man, that guy was that in a nutshell. And Cafe Tacuba is that. They're sort of maybe the Radiohead of Latin alternative music. I don't know how to describe them to people that don't know
like the
band.
way you were saying, someone is confident in themselves, they're confident in hiring you, you then become put at ease, you trust them more, blah, blah, blah. And a band like that is allowing themselves to go out is kind of giving you license to go out. And great.
It's great. It's fantastic. So we've done 3-4 albums together.
Yeah, you've done a bunch with them,
And it's always a freeing, and they're ones that they come into the album with a concept. They have a way they want to record it, whether it's outside musicians or a certain location or whatever, and they're big on their concept, and they go for it, and it's inspiring.
How big is the band?
It's really 4 or 5 core guys, but they have other people that come in and out, like hiring different drummer or
About the front bottoms, only because
those guys?
Well, I know Matt, the drummer.
Yeah,
because I met him in Jersey City when we lived in Jersey City like 4 or 5 years ago, or 3, whatever. He was friends with a friend. And
they're all living in Jersey City, just outside the tunnel. Yeah. No, they're great. We had so much fun that we did in their stinky little rehearsal room in Jersey City.
We did not.
We did like about a week or so. I don't know what this place was. It was like an ice factory or something. I don't know what it was.
Was it like by train tracks? It was like a hard scrabble
it was like
part
an
of town.
industrial part. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
It was pretty funky.
No, it's really, there's a funky rehearsal. Yeah.
But they're really funny guys, and Brian's great. But what was fun for me was can't remember what time of year it was, but it was nice coming back here because they're very East Coast guys,
right.
and I felt like, oh yeah, it's like being back in the hood with the guys. It's great. It was good.
Yeah, and how about Bleached? I like them.
Oh, really? You know the girls?
Yeah.
They're great. In fact, I saw them. They came by the studio maybe 3 months ago.
That's great.
They were wonderful. It was an interesting thing. I've been doing a few albums with a young producer engineer, Carlos De La Garza, and he and I co-produced it together. We also did Cherry Glazer together.
Oh, cool.
And Carlos mixed the Wonder Years for me.
Oh, great.
And he's really a great young producer, engineer, ex-drummer. He was in that band, Really Big Fish. You know that?
Right.
Yeah,
Real Big Fish.
Real Big Fish. Yeah, he's great, and it's like we've had a really good collaborative relationship. Where, like for instance, with that project, I went in, spent about a week or so, did the pre-production, worked on all the arrangements with the band, then did the tracks, and then he took over and did the overdubs. But I would check in like every 3 or 4 days, go out to his place, give them some thoughts on the guitar overdubs or keyboards, and then they'd go do some stuff. I'd come back, hear some vocals, give some feedback on the vocals, and it was just a great little process to kind of go through. Again, just a different way of making the record.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Awesome.
That's great. Well, I think
Well, good guys. This was
we're
fun.
good, right?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man.
I thought we were going to just talk about Jersey all day.
we can do that.
The day's not over.
That's the other podcast, Jersey Club. Me and Stewie want to thank all you Gear Clubbers for listening to this crazy podcast we do. If you can, leave a review on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And don't be shy. We love hearing from you guys on the social media at Gear Club Podcast. Don't forget to go to gearclubpodcast.com for Spotify playlists, links and photos for the episodes, and my favorite hot sauce of the month.